He's the editor-in-chief of the International Interest and joins us live from London. Thanks very much for being with us today. So what do you think that the Qataris had to concede, if anything, to get this agreement pushed through?
I think it's not about the Qataris conceding. I think it's about a change of the environment that has been brought about as a result of Biden's victory in the election, which completely upended Saudi Arabia's considerations for its future. It's important to remember that it was the Trump presidency that provided the underlying dynamics, that provided the confidence of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt to embark on this blockade. But for Trump, there would not have been a blockade. And now that Trump has lost the election and Biden is expected to bring in policies that are more sympathetic to Qatar and sympathetic to Iran, this has been a scramble from Saudi Arabia in order to try to shore up any issue that might bring about any antagonism from a Biden administration. And this is why I think that the 13 demands, when you look at them, Qatar has not fulfilled any of these 13 demands in order to bring about this reconciliation. It's also important to note that this announcement comes following Qatar's refusal to send its foreign minister to the pre-GCC meeting of GCC foreign ministers. It sent a lower rank diplomat, which was seen as a sign that Qatar was not responding to overtures from Saudi Arabia. The Qatar Emir still has not accepted the invitation to attend the GCC summit, or until the announcement, he hadn't accepted the invitation to attend the GCC summit. Then we saw this offer for open borders. So it's clear that the change is on the Saudi side in terms of their considerations. But there are also two other very important dynamics to consider, which is that Donald Trump no longer sees the blockade as conducive to U.S. interests, whereas before he didn't see it as affecting him, given that both Qatar and Saudi are U.S. allies, both were allowing unlimited access to U.S. bases. The blockade was not affecting U.S. interests. Trump in his last days is trying to shore up this Gulf alliance against Iran. And the third and very important dynamic, of course, is that Trump is going to leave the White House and he wants to remain on good terms with the royal families. We've seen business deals between the Qataris and between Trump in terms of the purchase of hotels, in terms of investment in some of Kushner and Trump's companies. So in other words, we have the Saudi considerations, Trump's political priorities, and also the personal level, all that has contributed to this limited reconciliation, I would call it.
So what do you expect peace between these countries to look like? Do you think it will be a return to how it was before this crisis?
I think your question indicates before this crisis, and if we remember before the crisis, relations were deteriorating rapidly. It's important to highlight that the ideological considerations that led to the tensions in the first place, i.e. Qatar's support for regional upheaval and the overthrow of regimes versus Saudi Arabia's preference for a maintaining of the status quo, this still remains. The reality is that this reconciliation is built more on fear than it is on hope. And there is this sense that there is a victor and a party that is now on the ropes in Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman. This has not changed. These parties are still competing in Libya. They are still competing in Yemen. They are still competing in terms of the media war over their support for their proxies and over establishing their visions for what the region looks like. And this is why I call it a limited reconciliation, in that what bin Salman is calling for is a truce. Qatar, lay off me for a bit. Al Jazeera, lay off me for a bit. Stop with the court cases. Stop with the negative media coverage. I need a bit of peace to focus on my reforms. I need to be out of the spotlight so that I don't draw any antagonism from Biden. But from the Qatari side, they're also willing to engage with Saudi Arabia, not necessarily because they will forgive Saudi Arabia, but because winning over Saudi Arabia is essential to breaking the alliance with the UAE, which has formed the crux of the anti-Qatar sentiment and anti-Arab Spring sentiment in the region. Saudi Arabia needs investment, it needs good PR, it needs the support of effective lobbying networks that only Qatar and the UAE can provide. Qatar will be thinking that given that bin Salman now is in a position of weakness, we should not necessarily go in hard on him, but maybe we can win over Saudi Arabia, break this UAE-Saudi Arabia alliance, isolate the UAE, and essentially push back against their aggressive foreign policy. In other words, the biggest loser in the reconciliation is not actually Saudi Arabia, which finds itself on the ropes or is worried about a Biden administration, but rather the UAE, which was against the reconciliation and has only accepted it because it's been forced to by Saudi Arabia. UAE is the biggest loser, and I think when we look at it in this context, we should welcome this reconciliation. It's a positive development. It should be affirmed. It should be supported. It's a positive breakthrough, and perhaps it will signal a shift in the region, perhaps to a more conducive policy that would lead to more dialogue and perhaps a calming down of tensions in other parts of the Muslim world, in Pakistan, Malaysia, Libya, in Algeria, in Morocco, where the Gulf crisis had a significant impact on the stability of these countries.
OK, Sami Hamdi from the International Interest, thanks very much indeed.